Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and greetings to all of you from New Mexico, the chili capital of the world, the 2nd District. For everybody who enjoys Hatch chilies in this committee room, you're welcome. Now, the Farm Bill has to feed New Mexico families. It has to support New Mexico farmers, ranchers, producers, and farm workers. And throughout this process, working with the chairman, I've been committed to fighting for a bipartisan bill that works for all New Mexicans and all Americans. Over the past year, I've convened a roundtable of agricultural stakeholders in every facet of our state's ag industry: chili farmers, onion farmers, dairy producers, cattle growers, tree nut producers, pork producers, small farmers, Native American producers, laborers, supply chain facilitators, local business development organizations, and upstart producers. Their perspectives and the realities that they face are what I bring to this committee to ensure that this bill genuinely represents the diverse needs of New Mexico. Now, I'm proud to have worked across the aisle with the chairman and many of you to secure critical wins for our constituents and for producers across the West. Together, we've included provisions to fully compensate ranchers for livestock losses from Mexican gray wolf predation, provide financial support to continue building wildlife corridors on private lands, create a pilot program for tribes to administer food programs directly, increase support for specialty crop farmers, modernize dairy pricing so that small dairy operations like those in my district that are going out of business can survive, and expand outdoor recreation and so much more to support New Mexico's producers, workers, and our rural communities. Now, I'm very proud of that work, but despite this bipartisanship, I continue to be frustrated with this committee's approach to the Farm Bill. Now, the gentleman from New York said we're going to have to compromise just a few minutes ago. Look, I was just in a almost all-day markup in the National Defense Authorization Act in HASC yesterday, and let me tell you, we compromised before we got to this point. We compromised on a bill that passed nearly with unanimous support because we'd done the work to get to where we needed to. Democrats talked to Republicans. Our ranking member and our chair talked to each other to ensure that there wasn't going to be any problematic issues related to a major bill that impacts the American people so much. That is not the case. In fact, we've delayed this process by a year due to partisan maneuvers that threaten to undermine the very goals that we've worked so hard to achieve. Any effort that takes the food off the table for hardworking families takes my vote off of the table. In the most dysfunctional Congress in history, this committee had the opportunity to deliver a bipartisan farm bill to support the well-being of our ag industry and our American families, but we are falling short. I urge my colleagues to consider the real-life impact to their constituents in this farm bill. We need a farm bill that serves all Americans and that feeds all Americans. Our farmers, ranchers, family, and children deserve nothing less. And without a good farm bill, I can't guarantee that Hatch chili is going to continue to be on your table. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back. And Mr. Chairman, I'm here today not to speak on my behalf, but on Eva's behalf. Because you know who doesn't have a voice in Congress? You know who can't get a job? You know who can't control the decisions of their parents or their caregivers? It's people like Eva, who write us letters, and they say, please help preserve SNAP. Please help make sure that other kids like me don't go hungry. That's an important thing for us to realize as we think about our own children who don't have to fear for going hungry, who aren't going to bed with headaches or tummy aches, who are going to school the next morning with a good breakfast. There's kids like Eva who may not know where their first or their next meal is coming from. And so it's critically important that in this committee, we think about not just our own families, but the families of people like Eva and her who took the time today to write me this letter so that we could be the voice for kids like Eva. It's just incredibly important because we want to have a healthy nation. And for my colleagues on the other side of the aisle that want to make sure that we preserve all life in this country, it's not just about birth, folks. It's about making sure that we take care of our kids once they're here. That's critically important. So let's make that promise to our children in this country, and let's make sure that kids like Eva have a fighting chance to be members of Congress, to be nurses, to be doctors, to be lawyers, to be whatever they want. With that, I yield back, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Amendment number 11, offered by Mr. Vasquez. Without objection, the amendment will be considered as read. And now recognize distinguished gentleman, the sponsor of the amendment, for up to 5 minutes for an explanation of their amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today, I want to emphasize the importance of restoring the climate guardrails, which I will call the conservation guardrails, from the Inflation Reduction Act and the Farm Bill. It's a common sense proposal that meets the modern needs of farmers and ranchers and empowers them to continue being the stewards of our lands and our natural resources. Indeed, this set of voluntary, and let me say that again, voluntary programs not only increase the sustainability and resiliency of our farms, our rural communities, and our working lands, but are oversubscribed and in high demand. My amendment puts the power back into the hands of producers and restores the critical climate guardrails set forth by the IRA while still increasing the conservation title baseline. This updated amendment would ensure that USDA is prioritizing climate-smart practices for decades to come. Specifically, this amendment creates a funding baseline for these practices in EQIP, CSP, RCPP, and ACEP. The updated language simply ensures that whenever we pass the Farm Bill into law, the amount we're spending on climate-smart agriculture will be the floor for what is spent moving forward. By ensuring that USDA cannot spend less than what they are right now on climate-smart ag, we will ensure that our farmers and ranchers have the resources needed to combat climate change. This includes USDA's efforts to fund climate-smart agriculture and forestry practices in both the IRA and Farm Bill so that we're taking a comprehensive look at conservation spending and fully capturing these vital investments. In August 2022, the Inflation Reduction Act invested nearly $20 billion in climate-smart conservation practices that are now being attempted to be clawed back by our Republican colleagues. In New Mexico, we deeply understand the importance of these investments. Farmers and ranchers here contend with shorter growing seasons, less water, invasive species, and a changing climate. Climate-smart practices ensure that upstart farmers don't have to choose between their bottom line and conservation programs. Programs like EQIP help improve soil health, increasing yield and protecting crops from extreme weather, something New Mexico farmers can witness firsthand. I just recently spoke with Zach, a pig farmer from New Mexico who uses EQIP to help with waste management and ensures that his lands are going to be healthy and his farm will be healthy for the future generations that he's looking to pass down his farm to. He talked to my office about how critical EQIP is for him to run his farm. A tax on conservation funding jeopardizes his future, and farmers like Zach shouldn't have to choose between what works best for their land and what we choose in the Farm Bill today to make sure that they can pass on their farm to the next generation. In New Mexico, water scarcity and drought are persistent challenges. Every county in the state is currently facing a drought designation. Conservation programs are among the best tools to help producers balance agricultural use with conservation. Last year alone, the EQIP and Conservation Stewardship Program application requests far exceeded available funding. Farmers and ranchers are eager to adopt climate-smart practices, but need more funds. We can't let these opportunities slip away. In fact, the president of the New Mexico Farm Bureau just wrote an op-ed in the Albuquerque Journal urging a bipartisan agreement on supporting funding for these conservation programs that are so critical to farmers like him and others in my state. At a time when climate-related pressures are mounting, it's vital that Congress provides the necessary resources to help producers remain resilient without sacrificing their profit. We must retain the climate-smart guardrails included in the IRA to ensure that our agricultural practices continue supporting our families, farmers, economy, and environment. Now, I can say this firsthand from visiting with folks all across this very vast district, bigger than the state of Pennsylvania, from places like Catron County, Reserve, Lordsburg, Deming, that this is not a partisan issue. Farmers and ranchers, and particularly ranchers who benefit the most, cattle growers in my district who benefit the most from these programs, are urging me to urge my Republican colleagues to keep this money in the Farm Bill. So today, I urge all of us to act in a bipartisan way, to vote yes on this amendment and ensure the longevity of our farms, land, and livelihood. With that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
I thank the gentleman. He yields back.
Chairman, thank you, Dr. Caraveo. Conservation, let's talk about that. That is the wise use of natural resources. That is using what you have to leave something behind for the next generation. That's what I was taught by my grandfather and by my family. I was also taught that some of the greatest conservationists in the world are hunters and anglers. Now, I hunt and I fish. Do we have any upland bird hunters here? I'm sure we have a few. Big game hunters? Well, you need the habitat to be able to hunt quail or chukar or pheasant. You need the grasslands to be able to hunt pronghorn, turkey, or mule deer. Now, in the West, in federal lands that are managed by the BLM, chances are you're going to be on a federal lease. You're going to be on a grazing allotment. And that applies to places like New Mexico, Nevada, Utah, California. That's where I hunt. And this couldn't happen if we didn't have these grants to make sure that in my state, the number one use of prescribed grazing means that we have cows, cattle that are rotating so that we can have healthy grasslands, so that we can save those riparian areas to keep those, to keep the wildlife corridors in place. You know, the top 5 uses in my state, should this amendment pass, are prescribed grazing, use of body conditioning scoring for livestock, brush management, pumping plants, and incorporating wildlife refuge areas, which are also places that I enjoy hunting in. So when we talk about conservation and what it means to all of us, not just the grazers, not just for the folks that are trying to improve water systems, but to the lifestyle of people all across this country in the West who consider themselves conservationists, these programs make that happen. That's why when I talk to those folks, when they need to repair water, when they need to convert an old windmill into a solar windmill, into a solar water, they talk to me about these programs and they say, Gabe, we cannot get through the NRCS application process. We've been denied for 4 years in a row. So please consider that as you're making this decision today, is that not only is this good for ranchers and farmers, but it is good for conservationists, hunters and anglers and wildlife habitat all across the West so that we can pass on those traditions and enjoy that heritage. That is what this funding does. With that, Mr. Chairman, I urge again a yes vote on this and I yield back. Thank you.
Gentlemen,
You know, one of the things I want to make sure that we think about as we look to the future of forest management in this country, especially as we've seen record wildfires in the West, is the adequate staffing of forest staff all across our national forests. Now, for those of you that have national forests in your district, you know how hard it is to keep professional staff in your district before they move up to the next position, which causes an inconsistency, which causes a lack of trust in our small rural communities, and causes some of the bad decisions that sometimes we often see with things like travel management plans, with things like forest management plans. We need consistency in the Forest Service at all of our national forests. In particular, I want to talk about prescribed fire burns. Now, in New Mexico, we had the largest ever wildfire because of a failed prescribed burn from Forest Service employees that were not there long enough to understand the climate of New Mexico during a certain time that is now costing the federal government $4 billion in compensatory damages because we cannot keep Forest Service employees long enough at one specific forest unit, and it is an issue, and it's going to continue to be an issue. So when we talk about what the funding levels look like for the forestry title moving forward, these have to be career opportunities. These have to be career jobs. I get it. Everybody's trying to look for the next job when you are in these positions in the Forest Service, but for small rural communities that depend on trust and building relationships with folks, we have to make sure that as we look to the forestry title in the next Farm Bill, that we are looking at consistency and permanency so that folks that want to live in a place like Reserve, New Mexico, or that want to live in a place like Silver City, New Mexico, have a career opportunity. Otherwise, we're going to continue to see catastrophic wildfires, mismanagement of our national forests. So that's one of the things that I just want to encourage our committee to think about moving into the future, that funding for the forestry title is incredibly important to making sure that we have qualified staff that is going to manage our forests, that is going to allow us to have that trust that we need to prevent forest fires like the ones that we are seeing from prescribed burns that are actually caused by the federal government. With that, I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Congressman Barry Moore and I introduced H.R. 7064, the Farmers Market Expansion Act, which would include tree nuts in addition to shelled tree nuts in the Senior Farmers Market Nutrition Program. This amendment is modeled after our bill, and it would benefit our seniors and over 2,000 pecan producers across New Mexico. Pecans and shelled tree nuts are vital agricultural products in New Mexico, and this expansion would not only enhance the nutrition of seniors, but also provide significant economic support to local farmers. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.